Hello, this is Michael Hexter. Welcome to my Politics 2100 video cast here on YouTube. So this video I'm calling "The Incredible Passivity of the Democratic Leadership May Still Lose U.S. Democracy." So this is a commentary that is just, I think it's running through a number of different parts of my other videos. And it's something I've written about in the Politics 2100 blog before, when I called the Democratic leadership masochistic, and they still are acting in a way as though the they're what they consider to be the ordinary rules of American democracy or Washington decorum still hold in Washington, where there are signs all over the place that the Republicans are not playing at all by any of these rules. And so basic game theory says that, your game theory sounds very either, it's a very well-established sort of logical, strategic modeling of the interaction of two parties, okay? And under certain conditions, it's an ideal, it's a model. It's not entirely realistic, but it does mirror some real, or some of it has relevance to reality, and it was used often by the nuclear strategist in the United States to model what the Soviet Union would be doing and how they would counterattack, and in terms of how to maintain at least the balance of terror, as happened during the Cold War, and to some degree still holds in the way the nuclear weapons regime is managed. But anyway, but the Democrats are facing a similar situation with regard to Republicans. The Republicans are willing to, quote unquote, defect, which is, in the terminology of game theory, means they're willing to basically betray. It's a game of cooperation or competition. So you can either cooperate or compete. And competing means that you defect. So defect means that you decide that you're going to be entirely self-interested, or and not only self-interested, but you're going to betray the other side. You're going to go nuclear, quote unquote, on the other side. And so the Republicans have been going nuclear on the Democrats for a long time, and they're continuing to, day in, day out. For instance, today we had reports of Steve Bannon saying that he was going to, if the Republicans get into office in 2024, he's going to he's going to suggest that the Republicans have 20,000 quote unquote shock troops available to basically totally rework the U.S. government. Now, that's already sort of we're considered to be the fringe of the right wing, but we have already sitting in the Supreme Court, and you could see this in there was on the Majority Report today, which is a program I often am able to watch some of or listen to some of, where you had reports about, or a summary of what's happening in the Supreme Court, and it seems like the Supreme Court is in essence going to be hollowing out the state, the U.S. government, from within, along with the other federal courts, if things go as they seem to have been planned out by organizations like the Federalist Society, and as basically has been stated by the intentions of the right-wing judicial movement that has now seated 6 of 9 justices. Okay, so it's 6-3 in favor of the right wing, who are trying to hollow out U.S. government. So anyway, in this context, we have people like Joe Biden and Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer who are overly, and Steny Hoyer, and who are overly obeisant to or conforming to the rules of the Senate, of unwritten precedents or written down precedents, but simply rules, and that are not laws, but they're not something that constrain them. So, for instance, the filibuster, or the fact the Supreme Court has 9 justices in it, which is not written down anywhere, is simply a custom, okay, of government as it's evolved. And so we have basically the Democrats unilaterally disarming, and this is luckily we have some of this being reported in some of the more mainstream media. I just also tuned briefly into MSNBC on the 11th hour. You had Eugene Robinson saying something, not exactly in my words, but something similar about bringing a penknife to a gunfight, and also quoting now the sort of the sanctioned voices on the mainstream media that say this are people who are of the Lincoln Project, or the sort of Republican, the former Republican operatives who now kind of circulate as consultants in the world of sort of centrist campaigning that favors the Democratic establishment, and they are, saying, I think truthfully, they're people who I don't trust fundamentally, because they are, they've made a lot of money and have not been particularly effective in their campaigning against Trump, for instance, or that they didn't persuade many Republicans to go with them. But anyway, I think they do have a realistic picture of how, and they sound the alarm bells about how extreme and how prepared the Republicans are to do anything for power, and the Democrats are not showing anywhere near this this level of desperation, you could say, or will to power is probably a better way to put it. And the video I made about apocalyptic nihilism is my speculation about the sort of psychological state which leads the Republicans to their will to power. But you could just, in more, not necessarily in such newly minted terms, in more basic English language, you could say, well, they're power hungry, and they are seeking power at by any means necessary, and they are desperate because and this oft repeated fact is that they are less and less likely as a party to win a majority in a national vote, and they haven't in the last 8 presidential elections. They've lost the popular vote. 7 of the last 8 they've lost the popular vote, and they will continue to lose more. And this demographic fact is something that has led or at least in my reading of the Democratic strategist consultant world, has led them to sort of think, well, we can just cruise into power and not do anything to help people, and make people's lives better in any substantial way. We can just simply wait for quote unquote demographics to help us. And meanwhile, this is cashing in, creating all kinds of lucrative opportunities for consultants, or also for large donors, to continue to serve the donor class, while being relatively passive and not angering the donor class by doing things that for the American people, because the American people want, for instance, the donor class to be taxed more. They want more direct benefits from government. It's becoming clearer that the public sentiment is 70% for what would be considered to be a social democratic agenda that is far to the left of the Democratic leadership and is closer to the politics of the Squad, for instance, or Bernie Sanders. And so, but they are desperate to keep that out of political discourse. And, I wrote about that as, that the Democratic Party is seen as a containment vessel earlier last year, in 2020, as a containment vessel for popular discontent by the donor class. So it's kind of a little bit of a it's quite a scam in a way, and that scam is to appear to be concerned about people's welfare and concern and to express compassion and so forth and so on, but then to do very, very little. Okay, to do almost nothing about it. So they are the good cops. Is the good cop, bad cop routine that I more recently wrote about and also broadcast about on this channel. And so anyway, so the Democrats are quite listless and passive, and this is why I use the word incredible passivity in this title of this video, that they're incredibly passive in their own cause, that they are not fighting hard for their own cause because they, for a couple of reasons, they are self-selected to be people who are not particularly feisty, okay, and interested in political battles, and who don't have really good political skills, and also are being paid not to really attend to the public and to fight for the public and to create a surge of power, or a surge of popularity, which then turns into political power for their party. They, in some sense, don't want to be, and this is part of the passivity or part of this containment vessel idea, they don't want to become the hegemonic majority power, that the popularity of the progressive agenda, which is not exactly the Democratic Party establishment agenda, would entail them to be. In other words, they don't want to be put in the position of being the hegemons in Washington, because that would mean they would have to govern. That would mean they would have to actually do things, and they would anger the donor class, because the things they would do would weaken the power of the donor class over ordinary people's lives. For instance, with the pandemic, people started to realize that, and they were getting some assistance, that they're starting the whole idea of the rat race to work for any employer at any wage, or at least very minimal wages, started to appear like an option rather than a necessity, and or also, especially with the threat of death from COVID, by going into the office. And so this opened up, and there's been a lot of panicked speculation that if this sort of social democratic agenda were implemented, that the employers, that the capital owners in our society would not have as compliant and passive a workforce, and that is a problem for them, and so they fight against it. And one of the ways they fight against it is to encourage the Democratic Party to have a weakened Democratic Party, and one that creates this appearance of caring, but then does very little to actually do this agenda. And meanwhile, colludes with the Republican Party to do nothing, okay, or to do nothing for the people, or to do only the very bare minimum for the people. And so if they did what they should be doing, or what what's demanded of them, then people would have more freedom to decide, no, I don't really want to work in that crappy job at that wage. I want this wage, or I want better working conditions for the same wage, or whatever, and so the prospect of not running in this rat race at low wages, or decreasing wages that are in decreasing buying power over time, over the decades since the 1970s, that prospect is no longer so it's not seen as written in stone anymore. So anyway, so we have we have the figures like Joe Biden, who has shown. I want to, I'm not a well-known person, and if I don't need to play too many politics with what I say, but in terms of my own relationship to powerful people, but again, Biden has surprised me. I had very, very low expectations for him, and he surprised me by being somewhat better than my expectations. But nevertheless, he is an extremely passive person, and a very, in terms of, I did the last couple of videos about ethics and deontological ethics. He seems to be he doesn't have a very high ethical standard, I think, for his own behavior and for the behavior of people around him. Other than, he's better than Trump, okay, and he considers himself to be a nice guy, and he tries to be quote unquote a nice guy, but he doesn't have a demanding high ethical standard for himself and for the policies, and he acts that way. And I personally think anybody in that position in the Democratic Party would be a left social democrat and fighting for a lot of, certainly, in other words, someone who is to the left of the current political spectrum, with maybe the exception of a few Congress people and maybe Sanders, that kind of drive to do the right thing is not there in him that strong, and so we have a party. But meanwhile, and this is where it gets really maddening, is that the identity of the party, they really are flirting with the end of democracy, U.S. democracy, because the Republicans are attempting to create a minoritarian system where voting doesn't matter anymore, and so, with the help of the Supreme Court, with the help of state legislatures that they control, and so we are really at a crisis point. And so the For the People Act and a bunch of other laws need to be passed, and the Supreme Court needs to be expanded. These are all things, student loan debt needs to be forgiven. These are things within the power of the presidency currently, and with the slight majority in the House and Senate that Democrats have, and they are not grasping onto these things and saying, this is power and we need to use it. They are not doing that, and it's either tragic, it's infuriating, it's just, these are gifts in some sense given to Joe Biden or given to the Democratic leadership, and they are acting as if they don't understand that this moment is an opportunity which they need to take, and they need to use it to the full extent, or else we will not have an American democracy anymore. And unfortunately, it sounds very partisan, but because the Republican Party has devoted itself to essentially autocracy and anti-democratic and voting not mattering anymore, at least if they follow the route of Trump, and they seem to be following the route of Trump, in terms of he just complains when he doesn't win, and he thinks that any election where he doesn't win is illegitimate. That so that they need to act on the opportunities they have. So I mean, I'm saying things here which you're hearing from other people on the left and even in the center who are saying this, but it needs to get to the actors who need to act upon these things. So the actors are not the actors. In other words, the people who have the power currently are not using the power that they have, or they're not. Yes, they're not using the power that they have currently in their legal roles that they have won via the election, and so. And it's just it needs the dawdling and the acting as if they have some other opportunities to it just doesn't make sense to me. And you know, there are people who say, well, he needs to maintain his Senate majority and he needs to sort of play by Joe Manchin's rules or by Kristen Sinema's rules so he can't anger them too much. Well, that immediately, this is where the idea of a hegemonic project needs to be installed in people's brains, that the Democrats need to create the framework where the actions of a Sinema or a Manchin violate not only sort of some partisan Democratic Party norms, but just the norms of the society. It needs to be made clear that people can't, you know, be so corrupt as Manchin and Sinema are, and it's just a matter of corruption. So it wouldn't be. They could be pressured from within the party, and you know they might defect to the Republicans. It could happen, but what's far better is that the Democrats start working on their hegemonic project, the project of creating in this case, the values of simply small d democracy, and also helping people face the realities of our current day, face the reality of the COVID-19 pandemic and the climate change, climate catastrophe that's really facing us. So, and our mounting emissions, our emissions continue to mount. So there should be no apology, there should be no shamefacedness, there should be no embarrassment. And to me, in my perception, it feels as though there's a hesitancy on the part of Joe Biden and a part of Chuck Schumer and the part of Nancy Pelosi in being the representatives of this project for the American people. They dance around it. They create they create offerings, various kinds of offerings to that project, but they don't represent the project on a daily basis as an ongoing discourse, an ongoing narrative. And maybe people sometimes prefer to talk about narratives. So it's not an ongoing narrative that they are building for the Democratic Party. I mean, the words "Build Back Better" sort of is the beginnings of such a narrative. But as I've said in another video, back and better, build back better. It's not moving forward in time. Better is vague, and it's a little bit, in my perspective, a shamefaced way to represent the Democratic agenda. And a start would be, as some people are doing, to talk about the specifics of what is in the reconciliation bill, and that would be a way to and continue to hammer on that, to hammer on, you know, child care and climate action and, you know, Medicare expansion, and keep on saying this. We are the party of Medicare expansion, the party of child care. We are the party of this. And so do the Republicans want to join us in this, or do they not? You know, and so redefining the political landscape that way. So creating this hegemonic project. So anyway, so that's why I'm calling this the incredible passivity of the Democrats. So I think me saying this in this video is is maybe I'm preaching to the choir if you're still watching this video, but I think that this needs to be hammered home again and again, that the Democrats need to represent themselves, and need to represent their agenda, their identity as a party that helps people and gets things done for the American people. So anyway, so if you liked this video, please like it, and if you are enjoying the general trend of videos here, please subscribe, and also please comment. If you have ideas about how the Democrats could really rescue themselves and rescue American democracy, because there are many ways to do it. I've just suggested a few after the long wind-up in this video, but please suggest in the comments if you do have some. Anyway, I'll see you in the next video.